into it. Welcome to the Culture House. Do you love it? We're gonna get right into it. I'm sure y'all are really tired, exhausted, so talk to us about how you're feeling. We'll start with Congresswoman Omar and we'll go around.
I'm feeling great now that I'm here.
Yeah, listening to everything that was happening down here, like the day just melted off, so thank y'all for that.
I'm tired. Looking forward to the conversation and some music. And clear out the chairs and let's dance and party. That's all.
Grounded, hopeful, good as heck. Inspiring, so I'm inspired.
All right, we're gonna do something really cute because it's important to spread love when we can. We're gonna do what we call the lightning round. And I'm gonna hand it off to Anita.
Are you guys ready?
Y'all know how this works, right?
Each other. All right. Who is most likely to have a secret cake slice?
Ayanna. Jamal's like, I gotta go to Ayanna's office now. That's where the cake is at.
Who's most likely to get people riled up?
Rashida.
Who's more likely to calm down? Oh, you guys can hear me? Who's most likely to calm everybody down?
Cori.
Sorry, it's me.
She's like a minister. Did you all know this? A nurse? Like, what's more calming than that?
Okay, this is a bonus one. Who's most likely to watch reality TV? Okay, we're gonna talk about we're gonna have to talk about Vanderpump Rules. Okay, it'll be fun.
All right. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez.
Yes.
I do get fun questions. Okay. Who is most likely to show up in gym shoes to a formal
Rashida.
Okay, so here's the reverse question. Who's most likely to walk in heels for cancer?
Ayanna.
Okay, we're really calling everyone out today. All right, who is more likely to be distracted in a meeting or pause in the middle of their remarks to greet a baby or a dog? This is very specific.
Rashida. Yeah, we all do that, but I think
Okay, so I'll keep the lightning round going. Who is the biggest cat parent?
Ayanna.
I'm the only cat.
That was a trick question. That was a trick. These are targeted.
Yeah,
This feels a little malicious,
my
actually.
cat, Sojourner Truth Pressley. You know, black folks always have good names for our cats. And her nickname is Sojo, because in our house, everybody does the work of abolition. Shout out to
Okay, here's one of my questions. Who's most likely to have a cup of coffee in their hand?
Ilhan.
You, okay.
And this, I wake up
That's because she
sometimes
doesn't
to
sleep.
drink coffee to go to
She's a
sleep.
night owl. She's a night owl, yeah.
So this might answer the next question. Who's most likely to be up all night?
And she's very nocturnal. Yeah, yeah. That's true.
Sharing is caring. Okay, I'm so excited. I get to ask the first question. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, Today, the fight for the Equal Rights Amendment looks different than when the first iteration of the amendment was proposed 100 years ago. Thankfully so. You, alongside Senator Ben Cardin and fellow squad member, Representative Bush, introduced a resolution to affirm the ratification of the ERA, and you and Congresswoman Bush founded the first ever ERA caucus in Congress. Can you speak to the significance of the renewed movement to pass the ERA at this moment in history?
Sure. Well, first, I just want to thank WFP, JD. I want to thank Culture House. I want to thank our entire team at Squad Victory Fund and all of our respective staffs as well. I just want to say it means a lot to be in this space. I was sharing with RT when we were coming in that this is where I held my Congressional Black Caucus reception in my freshman year, which was a no corporate event, and they told us it couldn't be done. But it was all black everything. And we did it here because I really believe very much in the power of artivism. There is no movement, there is no revolution without the arts. So I want to thank our artists because everyone has a role to play in the movement. Some people are going to pick up a mic, some people are going to spit a rhyme, some people are going to use the power of the pen or the paintbrush or the power of their bodies. But all are welcome in this movement and all of your gifts are needed. So I just wanted to say that. So let's hand clap for artivism. Okay, the ERA is very simple. You know, like many things when it comes to the work of justice and equality, we have made it complicated. But it's very simple. Equal rights under the law should not be abridged or denied by the United States or any states on account of sex. That's it. And we have been fighting for 100 years to enshrine gender equality in our Constitution. And you know, what's different about the movement in this moment is that this is a movement being led by 2 black women. Liberation on the front lines for everybody else, for centuries, even when our own humanity has not been seen and our full freedoms denied. There were 2 members of Congress who retired, Carolyn Maloney and Jackie Spear, who have been leaders in this fight, and I want to give them credit because they recognized that it was time for this movement to be led by those who stand to benefit the most. And so I'm very proud to be stewarding this effort alongside Representative Bush. We did introduce legislation to affirm the ratification of the ERA. The states have done their job. They met the threshold. We have to do away with this arbitrary deadline that was set in the 1970s. And that's really the crux of that. The momentum is high. The Senate Judiciary Committee held their first hearing in 40 years on the ERA, and we did have a vote in the Senate. We were not successful, but we are resolved and emboldened in this, and Leader Schumer has told us that there will be another vote. It is incredibly demoralizing that we are fighting this hard for something that has already been enshrined in the constitutions of 80% of the countries around the globe. And so when people ask, why now? Why is this essential? Why is it timely? I mean, it should be obvious, given the coordinated attacks, legislative attacks, in state legislatures throughout the country, in the lower courts, all the way up to the Supreme Courts, women still do not have our full freedoms or protections. I'd like to think that if this was already the 28th Amendment, perhaps the Supreme Court would be moving differently, or at least we would have had greater leverage in our fights against state legislatures throughout the country and the Supreme Court. We know all the sobering statistics, pay gaps, disparate burden of gender-based violence, attacks on our bodily autonomy and reproductive rights. And Representative Bush and I yesterday were talking at the inaugural convening of the ERA caucus. It never existed in the history of the House, and I thank Representative Bush for her visionary leadership and partnership on that front so we can keep the momentum going on every front from legislation to mobilization. I'll just end here by saying, never in this country have we stripped people's rights away. We are in an unprecedented moment. As a country, we have sought to increase rights, but we find ourselves in a moment where civil rights and civil liberties and legislative, constitutional rights and gains are being eroded. And that is also true for states that did ratify the ERA. And so we need to continue to be inclusive, intentional in this movement, but just know that we are closer than ever before, and that these two Black women are shoulder to shoulder and doing the work of liberation. And as I'm looking at, and she'll give that Ilhan, I'm looking at Ilhan. We love you. Come on. Yeah. So, I mean, listen, I think people just don't always believe us when we say that, we're really chosen family. And our sisterhood is bigger. That's right. It's bigger than any politics. And so we all claim this one right here. And I just wanted to say, as someone raising a 14-year-old daughter, that I think that we have normalized the indignities that women experience, that we conflated it, that this is just a normal experience, that this is just part of the experience of being a woman in this country. And I don't ever want Ilhan or my daughter or any girls or any women to believe that this is something that we should accept, that we still have second-class status in this country. And so this is not a fight for charity or benevolence. This is a fight for reciprocity. This is a fight for what we are owed for all that we contribute to this democracy, to our communities, and to our culture. And then I'd be remiss if I did not acknowledge that not only is this movement being led by two Black women, but it's being led by those representing multiple marginalized identities, our queer siblings, young people, because none of us are enshrined in the founding documents of this country.
Congresswoman Pressley. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, what is your favorite example of community activism that then turned into a legislative fight?
I think when the devastation of COVID fell on so many of our communities, we also saw a flourishing of community action and direct action in the absence of enough government action. And around that time, at the start of COVID, Elmhurst Hospital in Queens was the epicenter of the epicenter. It is where, before we figured out what the transmission vectors were, what COVID even really was, it was a public hospital, Elmhurst Hospital in Queens, that does not turn away anyone on the basis of their insurance or on the basis of their immigration status, their housing status, whatever. They treat everybody the same. And what we saw at that time was, out of the top 10 zip codes in the United States afflicted with COVID, 5 of them were in my congressional district. It was all hands on deck. And at that time, because it was so early, it was before the public health data had come in, it was before we knew almost anything. And there were organizers and people on the ground that were saying, this disease, this illness, is not hitting all of us the same. It is hitting marginalized communities more, it is hitting Black communities more, it's hitting brown communities more, it's hitting the working class more. And we had folks on the ground that saw this and knew this and rang the alarm about it before any public health data came out. And they said, so presciently, They said, we need to act on this now because once people find out that this is not hitting all of us the same, they're not going to want to act on it. There's going to be less urgency. We found out that some people are more protected than others. And so there was this moment, I remember, all of us were a part of it, where we were on these emergency calls, and it was almost it was such a dark time, but it was also a suspended reality, because there was a moment where everybody, all Democrats of all ideologies and Republicans, were almost willing to entertain anything, from universal basic income, to mortgage freezes, to freezing our credit scores. They put all of it on the table because they thought they were at risk too. All of a sudden, people with the most privilege and power thought they were in the same boat as the people who were most vulnerable. And when they were in that boat, they were willing to do anything. And so because the community organizers that we had on the ground, I represent both areas of the Bronx where the Young Lords originally had organized, and I represent areas of Queens where the Black Panthers and Malcolm X once lived. And Elm Corps, which is a community organization that was originally founded by the Black Panthers and decades later still doing everything from preschool and supportive services to food assistance, reached out and they said, we need to set up a funeral assistance fund, because funerals and the cost of funerals in this country is devastatingly high. And we're already seeing families with multiple people afflicted, and that will wipe out people's generational wealth in just a short matter of time. And so they said, this is what we should do, this is what we should mobilize. And in one of these calls, we were entertaining pretty much every idea. We made that argument. And I remember it because it was, there were a lot of people on the call, and there was the Senate leader, there was the speaker, there was all sorts of folks, and we said, can we at least cover this? And in everyone throwing a lot of ideas and a lot of paint on the wall, it stuck. And in that period, we fought, and eventually we got it passed in the American Rescue Plan. And what eventually got authorized was the largest FEMA funeral assistance program in American history. And we were able to get that done, not because it was our teams, not because it was me or any one of us as members, but it came from the genius of community. And I think ultimately so much of what we accomplish is about taking the ball that you all give us, the genius that you all give us, the insight that you all give us, and we just run it down the field. And I think that was just such a powerful example, because to this day, billions of dollars have gone out to everyday working class Americans so that they are that much less burdened by what we are already and continue to experience as a national travesty. And organizing can work, and it does work. And so often, our mass media and so often people in power of all ideologies want to convince us that what we are doing is futile. And it is not. It is not. It is effective, and it works, and people are changing each other's lives. And we just cannot forget it.
Transformative policy and investment.
Okay, the next question, but I think maybe a little occupied. Congresswoman Omar, you are now serving on the very powerful Budget Committee. And we've been hearing a lot about budget default in the news. What are the consequences of a default? And what are the consequences of the current Republican McCarthy budget proposal?
Thank you, and I would say as a mother, my hands are never full, right? Like, we learn to juggle it all, and this is Ilhan. No, you should wave. my princess. She's much younger than my older ones, and she always says, God sent me to you so I can bring you joy, and she truly does, so it's good to have her here. And again, it's also just really incredible to be able to share a stage with people who inspire me and make me feel strong every single day. So thank you all for being my squad. So I think there's a couple of things that people should really understand about what this current debate is really about. And why a default on in our country would be just really devastating economically. We've never defaulted as a country since we've existed. We've come close many a times, but cooler heads have always prevailed. We've always decided to pay our bills. And this is, I think, the first time that a lot of us are actually worried about whether we have cooler heads in the room to be able to prevail on behalf of our country. The debt ceiling has been raised about a little more than 70 times over the history of our country. Over 50% of those times have been raised during a Republican presidency. During the Trump presidency, we raised it 3 times without any strings attached. Because most of us understand that as a country, we always spend a little bit more than we bring in, and we budget that way. And there's always been a shared, I think, understanding that we have to pay the bills when they come due. That's what any responsible human being does, and we have to be responsible on behalf of our country as leaders in this country. But what the Republicans currently are doing is trying, I believe, run the clock. We are projected to default somewhere between June 1st to June 9th. And that is somewhere between 8 days and 2 weeks. To continue to have a conversation with Republicans who are, some saying, there's nothing to negotiate on. We gave you a list, you just have to sign. Some are saying, we don't actually believe there is such thing as defaulting. Let's just see what happens. And for those of us who are worried about what it looks like to just see what happens, we can see just the economic horrors that this country and the world would experience. So for our country right now, it means that there will be a jump to unemployment up to 8%. Right? We have one of the lowest unemployment rates in our nation's history. So defaulting, even a short-term default, few weeks, a month, would increase unemployment to 8%. It means a 4% drop in GDP. It means checks to seniors, their Social Security checks, would stop. It means veterans will not get their benefits. It means people who rely on Head Start to get their kids a fighting chance will not have that access. It means that air traffic controllers will no longer exist. So that means there's not going to be airplanes. Travel will halt. And I just want people to understand, right? Like Medicaid, Medicare, like all of the essential needs that we have as a country will slowly and surely not be met. So think about the senior that their only income is that Social Security check. That means they don't receive that check, rent is not paid. Many people get kicked out of their homes if they don't pay their rent. And so we are going to see an increase of people who are going to be unhoused. And once you have the kind of catastrophe just here in this country economically, you are going to threaten all the markets. So there is a ripple effect for the global economy as well. And as we just talked about with COVID, the initial impact of it exposed the level of inequality and access to resources that existed in this country. Now, think about that happening intentionally. Because of COVID, we had to stop a lot of things. And a lot of people were impacted, but we didn't have a way to stop it. So there was almost, as Alex was saying, just this desire to try to do everything we can to make sure people were made whole again. What is happening now is an evil act. It's Republicans saying, we are going to do all of these things to you. And I don't know if there will be a coming together of wanting to stop, right? The harm people are experiencing. So even with a short-term default, the lasting impacts of that and families recovering from that is going to take generations. That is why we've never defaulted as a country. And I think because Republicans are so good at diluting the conversation, we've also have been struggling, right? Because they've got all kinds of media outlets that just repeat and give people access to their messaging, that many people don't understand that there is two conversations that need to happen. One is a conversation on how do we stop default. The other is a budgetary conversation that happens during appropriation session. So we can have the conversations about what should be cut, like fiscal responsibility, all kinds of things. But to bring that conversation, future spending, into a conversation about what we spend in the past and the bills that are due, is as if you negotiating with your landlord when your bill is due at the end of the month and say, I'm only going to pay my rent if you give me a cut on the next month. Like, nobody here has ever had conversations, you know, if it like, when McCarthy uses the credit card analogy, you know, it's like, it's the silliest. I mean, and it sort of tells you, right, like they have considered this idea that the American people are fools, to constantly talk to them as they are like the stupidest people on earth. Because to say, you know, like, if you reach the limit on your credit card, you know, it's the same as defaulting. It's like, it's a most ridiculous analogy. Because when you reach the limit on your credit card, you have two options. One is to pay the freaking bill, and the second option is to beg for more money so that you can raise the limit. Like, are we in like 5? I mean, Ilhan could probably explain this, right? And so like this idea that somehow we've reached our credit limit and we're going to choose to not pay the bill, and we're going to choose not to raise the limit, and like magically there are going to be some results. Like, where do the results appear from? So I just want like for us to start having honest conversations about the irresponsibility of Republicans, their inability to actually lead, the way in which they are holding our economy, the global economy, hostage, and the kind of lasting damage that even if we were to default short term, will have on our country and the world for generations to come.
Thank you so much.
So if you live here and you have friends who live in other states, please have them call their reps and tell them to act responsibly.
Thank you so much, Rep. Omar. She gave us a quick breakdown of everything that's happening right now. And leading into this question, it's actually a good jump off, as we're talking about people who are trying to drive people into further poverty. We talked to Rep. Tlaib about all the ways that she has been a true fighter for economic justice and fairness. And, you know, she's been at the front lines. She's been on the front
fun of the
lines.
fact that I want to mint the coin.
That's right. She's been on the front lines of anti-poverty bills. And will you tell us a little bit more about all the ways you've been working on?
Yeah, so I come from the most beautiful, blackest city in the country, the city of Detroit, and we birth movements. So I want to birth a movement where we look at child poverty the same way we looked at Social Security, disability, and so many really incredibly transformative and meaningful change when it came to really providing support via the federal government for, again, the most vulnerable. Our children deserve, as soon as birth, to be able to have an opportunity to thrive equally. And so in Child Poverty Act that we introduced is something that, Childhood Poverty Act, is something that really takes the earned income tax credit, child tax credit, merges it into something on steroids. Where a child is born, you apply for their Social Security number at that moment through the Social Security office will be able to administer, again, really income monthly of, close to $400. And again, economists, folks that have looked at this know this can be incredibly transformative, and over close to 65 to 70% of children would be uplifted out of poverty. It would actually get to the ones that are really in deep poverty as well. I don't know how many of you have been around when earned income tax credit got put into place. It was the most successful anti-poverty program, but it doesn't work as effectively anymore. Because guess what? How much money gets left on the table? Because you gotta go apply for it. You gotta go apply for it. And many of our residents that can qualify for it don't have federal, taxable income. So they're not going over there to pay $50 or whatever for the for-profit tax preparer system, to go get that money. And some of them are completely unaware that that money is there. I see it over and over again, the balance of money that is still left at the table because they're not getting access. We gotta do something more automatic, more direct, less bureaucracy, and again, making sure children, again, have an opportunity to thrive. This all came about because I run 3 neighborhood service centers in my district. Getting people through everyday challenges really keeps me effective and grounded. We're all centered on constituent services. But the neighborhood service centers, I gotta tell you, somebody came in, a veteran disabled, he was like, I got $121,000 in student debt. And I was like, yo, that's a lot, And he didn't even get a degree. Why? Because the private, for-profit universities targeted him through the algorithms online, got him attached to it, and he ended up with this debt. Well, he's also disabled. So as soon as he came to the service center, I found out, Department of Education has this program where it wiped it. I thought I won the lottery. We, as a team, wiped out $121,000 in student debt through the Department of Education program. These are the stories that come in. So years ago, a woman came in, a mother, and Ayanna knows how I give. This mother comes in, and she's talking about this early childhood program down the street in Southwest Detroit and how they were closing it down. And I was like, don't worry, she was like crying about it. I said, don't worry, I'll find you a different program. And I'll make sure that it's, transportation-wise, you gotta think about all these things. She goes, Rashida, you don't get it. That's where my child eats twice a day. So it wasn't even about the early childhood program, it was about that. This is the daily livelihood of many of our families, especially mothers, again, in communities like mine that can't afford their water, because water's up 400% in cost. Literally, people are getting their children taken away because their water gets shut off, and they rather put them in foster care than actually try to help her be able to afford that water bill. Same thing with the high cost of rent and housing, and you name it. And it's so incredibly hard because, like in the city of Detroit, for instance, 60% of my residents have to leave the city to go find work. That's what, they work outside of the city. 70% that do work in the city don't even live in the city. And we don't have mass transit. It's just overwhelming. But one thing I feel very, very passionate about is let's start with the children. Let's start this automatic process of, again, looking at this. Child tax credit was incredibly successful, incredibly successful. It was this amazing, if anything, people are still studying the incredibly beautiful impact, positive impact of child tax credit. I wanted to take what we did with child tax credit, earned income tax credit, combine it, that's how we're paying for it, put it in a system where it's, again, less bureaucracy on top of, again, we were fighting for people not to even child tax credit because they didn't file taxes. Because again, they too low income or they didn't have have to file taxes. And so it is again important for all of us to think outside of the box of the systems that have been in place that got maybe put in there 40 years ago, and looking at it now, they're not as effective. Traveling vouchers for HUD. We can go on and on. We gotta be better in looking back at these programs that were effective maybe in the 80s and 90s, but it's not working for our lives today. And that's why I think we birthed the In Childhood Poverty Act. And again, in Detroit, people get it as soon as you talk about it. And it's something, again, I hope you all can check it out. I'm incredibly passionate about it. That's why if you look at this child, no child, it's not their fault, dude. Like, no child. And I never ever want a parent to ever think because he or she is too poor or something that they don't deserve to be a parent, they don't deserve to be able to create a family. Everyone deserves that. And again, our government should be about people first, and this is the way we can do it.
To our newest members of the Squad Victory Fund, y'all. Because the squad is big. Congresswoman Cori Bush exemplifies, She exemplifies what it means to bring movement, grassroots movements into the halls of Congress. So it is no surprise at all, right, that she just introduced an historic legislation calling for $14 trillion in reparations for Black Americans. She did not come to play, y'all. Why is the push for federal reparations and for the United States to formally acknowledge and apologize for the state-sanctioned institution of chattel slavery not only important, but also part of a larger movement that all people in America, regardless of racial or ethnic background, should collectively engage in?
Thank you for that question. Hey, everybody. So, first, because the United States has abdicated its responsibility for the enslavement of kidnapped, stolen Africans who were in their own country, living their own lives, minding their own business, and forcibly brought to this country in the most cruel, inhumane, savage manner. And we're talking about over 12 million humans that they stole. We're talking about from even actually before 1619, some, but if we look at just from 1619 to 1865, we're talking about over 222 million hours of forced labor, which is at the value today of about $97 trillion. I need a better response than that. Well, I mean, if you think about it, we work 40 hours and it's tough. We work 40 hours, some of us inside of the place, and we get to drink our coffee and we get to eat, we get lunch breaks, we have tough days. I'm not saying our days aren't tough, but our days are nothing like being enslaved. We're talking about folks who were raped, mutilated, over and over again. It was the way of life. We're talking about young girls and women over and over again. Women who had children that they needed to give their breast to suck, and they couldn't even feed their own because they had to take care of the white enslavers' kids while theirs died. We're talking about a place where the first 10 presidents out of the first 12 U.S. presidents enslaved black people. We're talking about a place where 1,700 congressmen enslaved black people. Y'all act like y'all ain't like that in the meeting. 1,700 congressmen. We're talking about people who write the laws, people who vote this stuff into action. And they own people, whole human beings. We're talking about a president, James K. Polk, who traded from the Oval Office. We're talking about Supreme Court justices, 5, who in my district where the Dred Scott case was heard. The Dred Scott case where those slaveholding judges decided that black people were not U.S. citizens. We're talking about the people with the power in the highest places in this land gave a green light, but also participated in the enslavement of human beings. And it was allowed. And as of today, in 2023, there has been no repair for the harm. And it also has to not only apologize for slavery, for the transatlantic slave trade, for the Middle Passage where 2 million black folks died and didn't even survive that journey to even get here, but also the vestiges of slavery. Redlining, lack of adequate housing, education, looking at Jim Crow, post-Jim Crow discrimination, the economic injustices we walk through even today. When, right here in D.C., white enslavers received reparations if they decided that they would free those that they had enslaved because they wanted to repair the harm that would come to them, because they would have the people that they enslaved. So they were each given $300. And now they would give up to $100 to those they freed if they left the country. Today, we still walk through what happened. When we look at even the massacres, we got to talk about over 6,500 documented lynchings. Who pays for that? When we're talking about race massacres, Tulsa, right now, there are living survivors of the Tulsa race massacre of 1921 who still have not received reparations, who was just in court last week. This country has a moral and a legal responsibility to fix its problem that it created, because the United States economy was built on that forced labor. Cotton. At one point, I think it was around 1831, the U.S. delivered nearly half of the world's raw cotton crop. Nearly half. And it was from the production of forced labor from those enslaved black folks. Built the economy of this country: tobacco, sugar, rice. Stole the land of black farmers. Still today, black farmers are trying to get their land back from generations. But when black folks say we need reparations for something that happened right here, we're told, oh no, we didn't enslave you. You were never a slave. Other folk can get reparations. So I need other folk who folk got reparations to speak up for black folks who ain't got reparations. Make this thing, make it right. The other thing is when we say $14 trillion, so there are scholars, Dr. Sandy Darity and Jason Hinkle and others, who came up with this number because it is the approximate amount of the black-white wealth gap. Any country that is so unjust and inequitable that simply based on race, there's a $14 trillion difference. This country owes restitution, compensation, and rehabilitation to black folks. And for those that say, well, people, this is the land of the free and the home of the brave, and this is the place, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Not for black people.
Hello? Exactly. And for those that do have the boots, it still does not mean that the U.S. government shouldn't pay for what they messed up and what they did. And we're saying 14 trillion is the low bar. All we're saying is that's the black-white wealth gap. We're saying that you got to do better because you got to fix housing. You got to fix the disparities in health care. You got to make sure our HBCUs can survive. And open all of the things. Fix economic justice issues in our communities. Fix the housing situation. Fix education. That's what we're saying. It takes every single person, whether you are affected directly or not, because this affects somebody that you know, somebody that you see, and if you say, I've never seen a black person before, I'm talking about folks that's watching. If you've never seen, never known, never been around a black person before, let your humanity speak. Because the thing is this, even for our law and order brothers and sisters, and queer folk, with some law and order queer folk, even for y'all, when somebody kills someone else and that person is dead and gone, those law and order folks say that person that killed them should be held responsible regardless of how long it takes. They want them held responsible. They want there to be some accountability in what they consider to be justice. And so even though our ancestors are no longer here, there still has to be accountability. There still has to be justice. And so, for the over 40 million black folk in this country, give us the check, but also give us all the other things that will bring us to a place of equity and equality in this country.
calms it down to the point where the opposition are throwing tantrums. Yes. I wanted to read a little bit from...
Stop being aggressive.
Yeah.
Laughing is aggressive.
This poem I'm just going to read 2 lines from this poem, but it's by E. Miller, and it says, "Black men are precious." Black men who survived the bullets, streets, and police. Black men who saw the horizon and the stars. They marched as if Garvey held out his hand, not to Ethiopia, but to our hearts. Black hearts now failing for unknown reasons. Why? Why do black men die so young? Black men are precious. Congressman Bowman, you are precious. Why do black men die so young? You've been using your passionate voice to stand up for our kids and communities across the country when it comes to gun violence. Why do you believe the energy towards solving gun violence in America has gone down while shootings have gone up? And why do you believe gun violence needs to be at the forefront of legislative discussions?
Yeah, so peace and love, everyone. How y'all doing? Shout out to WFP and JD and all the organizers in the room. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for showing us love. You know, it's tough being the only male member of the squad because, you know, they read poems and shit and get you emotional and take you to a point where you might cry in front of a room of everybody. See what happens? You start hanging out with a bunch of females and shit, get emotional. Anyway, you know, thank you for reading that poem and thank you for that question. And as you read the poem, it made me think about when I was 11 years old and a victim of police brutality, and how just existing as a kid and horse playing in my community, because I was a little bigger for my size, the police thought they could just manhandle me as they threw me against the wall, threw me on the ground, dragged my face on the ground. The whole summer I had scarred up faces. I was going outside and playing with my friends. I was 11 years old. Tamir Rice was 11 years old. He was playing with a toy gun in Ohio, and they rolled up on him without hesitation and shot him dead. And their excuse was, you know, they thought he was a man with a gun in an open carry state. And they had got a call from who knows who saying that there was someone out there playing with a gun. And when you're black in America, as you know, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. They see the color of your skin and they see you as a threat. And you know, one of the incidents that happened this Congress was the incident that everyone saw with Representative Massey. And, you know, right before that incident, well, 2 days before that was the mass shooting in Tennessee at a Christian school. It killed 6 people, 3 children who each were 9 years old. And that made me think of Uvalde. That made me think of Sandy Hook, that made me think of Virginia Tech, and that made me think of Columbine and the others that I'm forgetting right now. But you know, it didn't make me think of my own trauma as it related to gun violence. Because we are often so used to living with our trauma, we almost don't even acknowledge it's there, but it's in our bodies. And that day on the House floor, I had conversations with Representative Horsford, Representative Frost, Hakeem, and I was just imploring them that, yo, we need to go hard on this issue. They don't have an intellectual or moral or political leg to stand on. They don't want to do shit about gun violence. We got to go hard at them. And I was like talking like this, and you know, they probably had a million other things on their minds, so they weren't really giving me the energy back. Maxwell did share something though that was interesting, because I initially thought that he was a victim in Parkland, and that's how he came into the gun violence fight. He was like, nah, Jamaal, I was just hanging out in the neighborhood, and there was a shooting right next to me, and I would experience the shooting through that incident. And I was like, oh shit. I've been through mad incidents of gun violence in my life. When I was in high school, you know, as what often happens in many high schools, I got into a fight with me and my group of friends, got into a fight with another group of friends. People pulled out guns, just started shooting. This was 10th grade. That summer, that was the fall, 10th grade. That summer, I'm at the club hanging out with my friends. We get into a fight with some other friends. People pulled out guns and started shooting. About a year or two later, I'm out hanging out. I get a page. This is when we had beepers back in the days. And it's from my mom. And it's 911, so I call my house. And my best friend is there because his brother was just killed in an incident of gun violence, and he wanted me to come home to be with him. About a year later, less than a year later, his cousin was killed by gun violence. This is a friend who, by the way, mother was robbed of her welfare check when he was in 2nd grade and stabbed 40 times. So when we talk about gun, it's not just gun violence, it's senseless violence. And it's senseless violence connected to the complex traumas that people experience due to abject poverty that's perpetuated by political violence that comes from the federal government. So everything that has been talked about and Cori's talking about, that's why we fight the way we fight. So, but when I was in college, I think this might have been the most impactful incident. One of my best friends, his sister, who was a really good friend of mine, we all used to hang out. She was killed, and her 8-month-old baby was killed. And the funeral had both of them in a casket. The whole city came to this funeral. But it was just, so it was bugged to me that I had suppressed all of that just to live my life every day, try to go to school, go to work, take care of your family, you know, in Congress, doing all that stuff. But now that I'm in Congress, you know, we represent the Bronx. I represent Bronx, Mount Vernon, Yonkers. It seems like every other week, someone is shot and or killed by gun violence. And the thing that's crazy to me is like, the majority of Congress does not have a sense of urgency as it relates to doing something about this issue. Everybody's just going about their business, going about their day. In their nice suits, going to fundraisers, raising money, getting reelected, and they're not doing shit. Like, why are we negotiating with them on anything if they don't want to do anything about gun violence? Why are we negotiating on any issue? Any issue. If we have people in Congress that are okay with our children being killed and gun violence being the #1 killer of children in America, we have lost our soul as a nation. And so when I processed all of this consciously and subconsciously before I came out and started yelling at reporters to ask Republicans what the hell are they going to do about gun violence, which is what led to Massey addressing me and then us having that back and forth. But for me, you know, as I hear everyone speak on the issues that we're fighting for, I'm really grateful and appreciative to them and all of us and all of you. But I'm also like, damn, yo, like we gotta take over this whole shit. Like, like, and I mean right now, like right now. Like right now, like 2024 is a wrap. Yeah. It's not just taking back the House. We got to grow seats in the Senate. You've got to drag this 80-year-old man across the finish line of the win.
Why? Why?
I'm sorry, man, but I'm upset, yo. Because here's the
Why?
other thing, right? It's like,
Why
listen,
Biden?
I know, right?
Why?
I know. And maybe it should be one of us. Which I'm not against. But when I say take over the whole thing, I mean like, you know, we're here for a reason.
And that's progressives.
All of us are here for a reason. And so, yes, we need to elect progressives. And yes, we need to get the right people into office, real progressives.
But how can we
But we gotta do it right now.
How can we do
We gotta do it right now.
How
And so right now is right now.
How can
And we are all here tonight to begin the process of doing what we need to do for next year and beyond. So the fight continues, and we are gonna win the fight. Because we're already winning the fight. The fact that we are up here, the fact that I'm the first person of color in U.S. history to hold my congressional seat, the first black man in U.S. history, obviously, to hold this congressional seat, the fact that it was the grassroots that got me here, not no corporations, the fact that I come from education and I have that lens to protect children at all time, no matter what. If I am here in this moment to do this work, that means this is a moment for all of us to bring transformational change to the country and to the world. I truly believe that. We're not here to be quiet, to be complacent. We're here to shake the whole thing up and take it over. And we gotta do it right now. Thank you very much.
So we're gonna do a mini lightning round, 1 minute each. Closing remarks, whatever you all want to share. But I would like to ask if you want to share, when you go to sleep at night and you reimagine a free world of equity and accessibility, what would be the first thing that you would do? And that you wouldn't have to be serving in Congress because everything was beautiful and everyone was free. So, what would be the first thing you would do in a real free world? We'll start with Congresswoman Rashida.
Oh, no, I thought we just did a 1 minute.
Yeah, 1 minute.
You can do that.
Okay, or share whatever you would like to share. At the beginning, Congresswoman.
All right, shout out to Rasha. Let me just say that. Thank you, Rasha, for all you do for this movement. You know, the reason why I said I was feeling good as hell is because whenever I'm with movement family, I feel good. I feel emboldened. I feel resolved. I have clarity. Very often, I say the squad is big. Although from a congressional standpoint, it is growing, it has always been more than the members of Congress that people have characterized as the squad. I love what we do together, what we do in this movement, because they sought to weaponize something that is beautiful. To weaponize and to vilify, but we, as a people, are used to that. But we are winning. And so that's the message I want you to get coming out of this. Organized power is realized power.
Yes.
Organized power is realized power. And I will not pretend that there are not dangerous, draconian, or white supremacist forces at work every single day. But in the midst of it all, this movement is growing. Now, policy is my love language, and I'm serious about that, because a lot of the harms, well, every harm that we've named here didn't just happen in the ether. It was something codified in somebody's budget. It was something legislated. So the way that we undo centuries of harm to the marginalized and be enfranchised is through organizing and mobilizing to move policy. Because we already know what it is to experience and live in legislated hurt and harm. Now, let's know what it is to live in legislated equity, healing, and justice. It is possible. It's very simple. Who you vote for determines who's elected. Who's elected determines what the policies are. And the policies determine who lives, who dies, who survives, and who thrives. So it all comes back to policy. And progressive policies are sorely needed and very freaking popular. And despite their efforts, because we don't just experience attempts to marginalize from the other side, despite attempts and efforts to fringe the issues from this movement, we are winning on taxing the rich, on universal basic income, on student debt. I do believe we will ultimately win that, so I gotta say
Congressman, did you give a memo to
fair free transit, we're winning. Yeah, what else, Rashida?
Congressman, didn't you give a memo to Biden with Senator Wong regarding student debt to tell him to use the Higher Education Act?
Let me just say this, because I'm gonna get in trouble if I start taking questions from the floor, okay? But I want to say on student debt and where that fight stands right now, it is in the Supreme Court. By the way, expand the courts. Reform the courts, expand the courts. And it's not that radical, y'all. There is precedent. It's been done 6 times before. It's far right, it's extremist, it's imbalanced, and they are causing great harm. That is where the student debt issue is right now. But that being said, we're all organizers, and no organizer goes into a fight without a contingency plan. We have them, but I'm not ready to see defeat here because the legal case is sound. The legal case is sound. So, stay tuned on that because we know that was a motivating issue in the midterms for many. This is a transformational, consequential issue, and we're not giving up this fight. So in the fact that we made it this far, first they said the president didn't have the authority. Then they said it would be regressive in impact and only benefit white graduate students who went to affluent schools. And we have challenged and proven all of that wrong. This is a huge coalition of impacted borrowers, civil rights organizations, union workers, presidents, tradesmen and women. But my point is the progress that has been made is because of the movement. So I'll just close by saying this. And it is progress. And listen, 60 million people have already benefited from this relief. Provided the Supreme Court follows the letter of the law, 1 in 4 black borrowers will have their debt zeroed out completely. This is 40+ million people that stand to benefit. Do we want more? Do we fight for more? Yes. But Pell Grants are our most burdened recipients. And the fact that $20,000 worth of debt will be canceled for Pell Grant recipients and $10,000 for non-Pell Grant recipients, that is progress. The legal case is sound, the president has the authority, so let's see what the Supreme Court does. But my point here is, as much as I want government to lead, more often than not, government does not lead, but it does respond to pressure. And so we have to keep it up. So I thank you all for recognizing that movements and revolutions require resources. So we thank you for your investment, and we thank you for your solidarity in this movement. The squad is big, y'all.